Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our study of the Yoga Sutras. So if you remember, we are discussing what are the different techniques that Patanjali has given to overcome the chitta vikshepas, or the agitated nature of the mind. And we began by discussing the first solution was dealing with the social dimension of our life by developing some qualities like friendliness and compassion and so on. So now in today's session, we are going to discuss two very, very powerful sutras, which we can straight away apply in our life when we feel that our mind is extremely agitated. So let us discuss the first sutra. So here in the first sutra, Patanjali is giving us a breath-based method of controlling the mind. And this is how the sutra goes. Prachardhana vidharanabhyam va pranasya. Right? What does it mean? Prachardhana means release, exhaling, and vidharana, holding, retention, abhyam, of these two. Basically a technique based on exhalation and retention of pranasya. Right? So literally the translation means, or by the controlled exhalation or retention of breath. Right? What happens with that? The chitta vikshepas, the mind can be calmed by using these two techniques. Now, this is a very, very handy and a powerful technique. When our mind is running wild, one of the powerful ways in which we can control the mind is by learning to control the breath. Now, how are these two things connected? Right? So this is none other than the technique of pranayama. Now, we understand that the mind helps, the chitta is what that is controlling the external senses, right? When I think of, looking at something, I look at it, I process the information. All my five senses are being controlled by the mind. Mind is like the central controlling unit, which is processing the information from all these sensors called as the different senses of our body, right? However, what is that link between the mind and the senses? It is described, that is the prana, right? Prana, now we understand, has two components. One, it is the life energy. That is what is ensuring the functioning of all the vital organs of our body. All the vital functions of our body is being controlled by the prana. Like for example, the way our heart is beating and causing the blood to circulate in our body, the way the signals in the nervous system of our body are flowing, the tiny electrical impulses, right? That is also the effect of prana. The way the food that we eat, it goes through automatically through the esophagus, through the entire digestive system, and eventually is excreted out. All of this is happening because of prana. So prana at one level, right, can be seen as that vital energy in our body, which is the life energy in our body, which is causing all these inner functions to take place. At a more external, at a more gross level, prana can also be seen as the very breath that we inhale and exhale constantly, right? You see, you can understand how important this prana is. If I don't breathe, then there is no prana, then there is no life in this body. Breath is what that literally is giving us life at one level, right? So this breath is that can also be seen as that link between the mind and the senses. So by regulating the movement of this breath, I can also control the mind, which means just like how mind using the breath controls the body, by using the body and the physical act of breathing, I can also help control the mind. So to understand this connection very easily, here's a very simple example, right? Imagine I have a wheel and a shaft, as you can see here, right? So as that shaft rotates, right, the inner wheel is rotating, right? So that is the link here between these two, right? Now think of that inner wheel to be like the mind. And every time that wheel rotates, that outer shaft also rotates. Because of that link between, now that outer shaft, think of it as the physical body, all the external senses of our body. And that link between these two, those grooves that you are seeing, is like the prana. Now, because this prana is the link between body and mind, it can act both ways, right? So if I have to restrict the movement or the agitation of the inside wheel, I don't have to open the machinery. I don't have to open the entire box and hold and put a brake on that wheel. All I will do is I will put a brake on that externally visible rod. Just by doing so, if I break the shaft, right, then I also break the movement of the inner wheel. So think of this technique, the way how even pranayama works. Just by regulating my inhalation and exhalation and by retaining my breath, I can also help control my prana. And many of us, we may have a direct experience of that. When you are disturbed, when you're anxious, our breath changes. Did you ever notice that how when you're anxious, you have very shallow breaths? Or when you're angry, you start breathing very fast. On the other hand, when you're very happy or peaceful, you have nice, deep, relaxed breaths, right? So breath and our inner state of the mind are very closely connected. In fact, from the modern terminologies, the word emotion actually represents that link between the physiological and the psychological states, right? Like the physiological state of smile and tears, and there's a psychological state of happiness or sadness. All right. So these two are linked through those emotions. So in other way, we can also see how prana and emotions are so strongly connected. So when the mind is extremely agitated, disturbed, right? So then by using this method of breath control, breath restraint, one can also help control the mind. And then Patanjali gives another powerful technique of controlling the agitated mind. He says, Vishayavati va pravritutpanna manasa sthiti nibaddhani. So what does it say? It says, there's objects of senses. Vishayavati here means having anything that can be perceived, right? Basically all the sound, form, taste, etc., etc. Anything that has sense perception, right? By contemplating on that sense perception also, one can steady the mind. Now, what does he mean by contemplating on a sense perception? Right? When the mind is extremely disturbed, one can just actually sit down in one peaceful place and just meditate on an object of the senses, because we need something to meditate upon, right? We cannot meditate on nothing. We cannot just suddenly say, mind, stop all my thoughts. That is extremely difficult. Rather, here is Patanjali giving us a very tangible process wherein he's saying, just learn to meditate on one of the sensory inputs. One of the classical examples that is given when it comes to thinking of sensory inputs is meditating on the tip of the nose. Nasa agre, Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita as well, right? Nasika agra, at the tip of the nose, right? Now, when the mind is disturbed, the idea, when you say, meditate on the tip of the nose, it is not the same as staring at the tip of the nose. If you continuously keep staring at the tip of the nose, you'll probably start feeling giddy, right? But what we are trying to do here is, when we close our eyes, right, or at least half close our eyes, we will have an approximate idea, because the mind also has a sense of direction, a sense of space. So we'll have an approximate idea of, in this space, right, where is the spatial location of the tip of my nose? And just by trying to interact with that spatial location of the tip of the nose, I am giving my mind something to meditate upon. And by doing so, one will be able to rest the agitated nature of the mind. And it's not just about sight, but one can also use sound, right? Especially in traditions where where japa is performed, where repeated chanting of the Lord's names is performed. One of the powerful ways is by trying to meditate upon the source of that sound. Like, for example, if our vocal cords, right, they are the source of the mantra or the sound, right? So when the mind is very agitated, even sometimes during meditation, it will be a good practice to just keep your eyes half closed and just try to meditate on the source of that sound. Just try to feel how the vocal cords are vibrating and how that sound is being produced, right? And at that stage, you are not just producing sound, but rather you are interacting with the very process of how that mantra is being produced by the vocal cords, and how you are interacting with the the entity called as sound with all of your mind. So you're not just randomly producing sound and hearing, but rather you are absorbing yourself in that experience of producing sound and trying to interact with it through your ears and eventually absorbing it to the mind. So these are very powerful techniques by contemplating on a particular sense perception. And this is also such a powerful technique. If you if you ever practice the shavasana, the method, you will see how when the body, after a long yoga practice, when you try to engage in shavasana, simply by meditating on the different limbs of our body, you will see that how that specific part of your body naturally starts to feel relaxed, right? Because even after a long day, not necessarily after a yoga practice, but even after a long tiring day, you'll notice that when specific parts of your body are undergoing pain, simply by lying down and peacefully trying to meditate on that specific part of your body, you are channelizing all the attention to that particular part, right? In fact, the reason why pain exists, because by pain, what does it do? It is actually the precursor to healing. What does that pain do? It is calling out your attention that, hey, think about me. Here I am, I need your attention. And what does this attention mean? Just by diverting our consciousness. Now, consciousness is a spiritual force within us. Just by diverting that consciousness to that specific affected part of our body, the body's inner mechanism of self-healing is triggered, right? That is why you see that, when on a normal day, when everything is all right with our body, we rarely think about some parts of our body, right? Now, imagine if I were to cut this, accidentally cut my little finger, right? Then throughout, the activity whichever I'm doing, that little finger is calling out for my attention in the form of pain. And just by diverting my attention there, I'm allowing the natural healing process to expedite, and the healing takes place faster, right? And so, and many times what happens, we tend to neglect that pain. We tend to forget that pain because we get distracted with so many other activities in our life. And slowly that pain, rather than healing that particular part of the body, starts to become more and more toxic, right? with that kind of it could be anything. Sometimes it could be, if it's a mental pain that is transferred to physical state, then it becomes like a permanent blockage in specific part of a body, right? Sometimes you will see if people have gone through very anxious lifestyles, or even some recent traumas, specific parts of their body, like for example their shoulder, their spine, the lower back, etc., some of them, they tend to be very stiff, right? Why? These are all basically the blockages of the vital energies in the body. So just by meditating on that particular part, you are actually releasing the pain out of that body. So the whole idea of contemplating on sense perceptions is actually a very, very powerful methodology in the yogic healing process. And of course, here Patanjali is asking us to use this as a channel for deeper absorption of the mind, so that the chitta vikshepas can be very nicely overcome, right? Of course, these are two very simple and tangible techniques. In the future sessions, Patanjali is going to reveal us more practical ways to help control the agitated mind eventually, so that we can come to that stage of Samadhi. So thank you all so much for joining us today. See you all in the next session, where we will discuss more practical techniques of controlling the mind as given by Patanjali. Hare Krishna.